Okay, so you're all here, I'm assuming, because you want to, like, stay on top of all the major things that are happening in the world,
Right.
especially the ones that could, really impact things globally.
Yeah, especially for like UPSC folks, right?
Exactly.
This is big for current affairs.
Yeah, you've got to be all over this stuff if you're studying for UPSC.
Yeah. And even if you're not, it's good to just be aware. Just like what's going on in the world.
So that's what we do here on the Deep Dive.
Yep, deep dive.
And today, we're looking at something pretty huge coming out of the U.S.
Yeah, this DEFUND Act.
The disengaging entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act.
Catchy, right?
Yeah, catchy.
Thankfully, everyone's just calling it defund.
Defund.
But yeah, this thing could like seriously shake up global governance.
Oh, yeah. It has massive implications for the UN.
And like everything it does.
Like peacekeeping.
Development program.
Yeah, humanitarian aid.
The whole 9 yards.
So we're going to like really break it down.
Yeah.
And we've got this really sharp analysis from the Hindu to help us kind of untangle it all.
Yeah, that piece is a great starting point.
It is. So, all right, so let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
So this Defund Act, it's not like the U.S. has always loved the UN, right? There's been tension there before.
Totally.
But this seems way different.
This is not just like, oh, we're a little annoyed with the UN this time.
Yeah, this is like a total break.
Yeah, a complete divorce.
And they're not messing around, like they have a plan to make it happen.
Right, in the legislation, they're like, here's exactly how we're going to do this.
And part of that is like going after the legal stuff that connects the U.S. to the UN.
Yeah, the bedrock of their relationship.
The Hindu talks about repealing the United Nations Participation Act of 1945.
That's the big one.
And the United Nations Headquarters Agreement of 1947.
Which, might not seem like a big deal, but it kind of is.
They are, right?
Huge.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so that 1945 Act, that was basically America formally saying, okay, we're in the...
Like we're signing on to the UN Charter.
Right. All the goals of the UN, the rules.
Working together to, like, keep the peace.
Upholding human rights. All that good stuff.
All the things the UN is supposed to do.
Exactly. And by repealing that, it's not just leaving. It's like saying, we don't even agree with the basic idea of the UN anymore.
They're rejecting the whole thing.
Exactly.
And that headquarters agreement, that's the one that lets the UN actually be in New York, right?
Right. It gives them their little island there.
And some legal protections,
Yeah,
too.
like diplomatic immunity and stuff.
So repealing that is basically saying, like, get out.
Pretty much.
We don't want you here anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty symbolic.
It's a really big deal. And the Hindu also digs into the money side of things.
The financial implications.
Yeah, because this act wants to cut off all U.S. funding to the UN.
Which is, kind of a lot.
A lot.
Like, a lot.
Like, what does that even look like in actual numbers?
Well, historically, the U.S. has been the biggest single donor to the UN.
Bigger than anyone else.
By far. They give about 22% of the UN's core budget.
Just for, like, keeping the lights on.
Right. And then about 28% of the peacekeeping budget.
Okay. So that's a huge chunk of change.
It is. And if that money just vanishes overnight, it's going to cripple a lot of UN programs.
Yeah. Like, we're talking peacekeeping missions.
Humanitarian aid projects.
Global health initiatives.
Anything the UN is involved in, pretty much.
Yeah, it's all going to be impacted.
The Hindu specifically mentions peacekeeping in, like, South Sudan.
Like in Central African Republic.
Valley.
Places where things are already really tense.
Right, where the UN presence is like all that's holding things together.
And without that money, those missions might have to scale back.
Or even shut down completely.
Which would be devastating for the people living in those places.
Absolutely.
So we've got the legal stuff, the money stuff.
And then there's the whole geopolitical angle.
Right, like the U.S. has always been a major player at the UN.
Especially on the Security Council.
Yeah, that permanent seat gives them a lot of power.
Right, they can basically veto anything they don't like.
So what happens if they just walk away from all that?
Well, the Hindu says it's likely going to create a power vacuum.
Like other countries are going to try to fill that void.
Exactly. And the countries most likely to step in are,
China and Russia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their interests don't always align with the U.S. or, the kind of traditional Western-led world order.
So it could really shift the balance of power.
Big time.
And not necessarily in a good way.
Right. Like who gets to set the agenda on issues like climate change?
Human rights.
Nuclear proliferation.
All that stuff could look very different.
Yeah. And if the U.S. isn't at the table, they don't really have a say.
The Hindu even suggests that the U.S. could become diplomatically isolated.
Right. Like if everyone else is working together and the U.S. is off doing its own thing.
It kind of weakens their position.
It makes it harder to negotiate.
To build alliances. To, get things done on a global scale. And then there's the impact on UN peacekeeping, which As someone following global security, I find particularly worrying.
Yeah, the U.S. has historically played a huge role in those missions.
And not just with money.
Right. They provide a ton of logistical support,
Training.
expertise, the whole package. And this DEFUND Act would basically bar the U.S. from participating in any of that.
It's like a complete hands-off approach.
Which could make it almost impossible to run those peacekeeping missions effectively.
Especially in places like, we were talking about before.
South Sudan.
Central African Republic.
Mali.
Yeah, those are all places where UN peacekeeping is already stretched thin.
And losing U.S. support could be the tipping point.
Absolutely.
So, this whole defund thing, it's not just about the UN.
Right. The Hindu connects it to this broader trend of economic nationalism.
Which is basically putting your own country's economic interests above everything else.
Exactly. And we've seen that with the Trump administration's tariffs.
Yeah. They slapped huge tariffs on goods from all over the place, often using national security as the justification.
Which, is kind of a slippery slope.
It is, and it reminds me of what happened back in the 1930s.
Oh, yeah, like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act.
Exactly.
Which a lot of people think made the Great Depression even worse.
And contributed to global instability.
Which eventually led to World War II.
It's a pretty stark reminder of how dangerous protectionist policies can be.
It is, and it's the total opposite of what happened after World War II.
Right. The whole world was like, okay, we need to cooperate more.
We need to break down barriers to trade.
And that led to the creation of GATT.
Which later became the World Trade Organization.
WTO.
Which has been really important for keeping the global economy stable.
Yeah, it's basically the referee for international trade.
But even the WTO has been under attack lately.
The Hindu mentions how the U.S. has been blocking appointments to the appellate body.
Which is like the Supreme Court of Trade Disputes.
Exactly. And without a functioning court, it's really hard to enforce the rules.
So it's like another example of the U.S. turning away from multilateralism.
And towards this go-it-alone, America-first approach.
Which, as the Hindu points out, could have some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, like for global governance in general.
Like what happens when all these international institutions start to crumble?
It makes it a lot harder to tackle global challenges.
Like climate change,
pandemics,
pandemics,
abuse.
all the things that require countries to work together.
And if the U.S. is just going to go rogue...
It could lead to a lot of instability and uncertainty.
And the Hindu even suggests that it could backfire on the U.S.
Yeah, like other countries might retaliate.
Or they might just decide to ignore the U.S. altogether.
Which would make it really hard for the U.S. to achieve its foreign policy goals.
So the Make America Great Again slogan.
It sounds good on a bumper sticker.
But in reality, it's not that simple.
You can't actually make America great again by isolating yourself from the rest of the world.
You need to cooperate.
You need to build alliances.
You need to work together to solve problems. And that's what these multilateral institutions are for.
But the Hindu also presents kind of an interesting flip side to all of this.
Like a silver lining, maybe?
Yeah, they suggest that the U.S. stepping back could actually create an opportunity for other countries
like India
to step up and take on more of a leadership role.
Right, because India has always been a strong advocate for multilateralism.
They believe in international law.
In working together to solve problems.
The Hindu even mentions External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar.
Right. He spoke at the G20 foreign ministers meeting earlier this year.
In February 2025.
And he really emphasized the importance of an inclusive approach.
Finding peaceful solutions.
Yeah.
Cooperating to address global challenges.
Exactly.
So, maybe this is India's chance.
To really push for reforms at the UN.
Especially the Security Council.
Yeah, India has wanted a permanent seat on the Security Council for a long time.
And if the U.S. is less engaged?
It might be the perfect time to push for that.
And to reshape the UN into a more representative and democratic institution?
Yeah, maybe this is the shakeup the UN needs.
Okay, so to sum it all up, this DEFUND Act and the whole America First philosophy.
It's really putting a strain on global cooperation.
It's like we're seeing a shift away from multilateralism.
And towards something a lot more uncertain.
And potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
The UN, the ICC, the WTO.
These are all institutions that have been vital for maintaining peace and stability.
And weakening them could have some really serious unintended consequences.
Yeah, this is definitely something to keep a close eye on.
Especially if you're prepping for UPSC.
This could be a major essay topic.
Oh, for sure.
So I hope this deep dive has given you a good overview of what's at stake here.
And maybe even spark some thoughts about what India's role should be in all of this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time to be studying international relations.
It really is.
And we'll be back next time to deep dive into another crucial topic.
So make sure you like and subscribe to The Deep Dive.
And leave a comment if you have any questions.
And don't forget to check out the Hindu article we discussed today.
It's a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more.
Until next time, stay informed
And engaged.